Are we on the internet? I think we've got levels. I think we've got streaming. I think we have people muting themselves in Discord so that they don't transmit their personal and state secrets out over the internet. Hello again. This is Foghorn with another installment of Flight School Academics. Tonight talking about combat aviation. For this, the 20th of October, 10 days, a week and a half after CitizenCon, which was awesome, by the way. This presentation is part of an ongoing series of academics for the members of the Aurora Republic, a premier role-playing organization in Star Citizen. If you are new to the Aurora Republic or visiting us for the first time, let me start by saying welcome. We are glad to have you with us, and we'd love to hear from you if you are interested in hearing more from us. We are a lawful good organization focused on role-play exploration and social interaction, and are currently active and recruiting on Spectrum and Discord. Tonight, my good friends, we're talking combat aviation, specifically one of the first concepts that I've already introduced you to, the pursuit curves, and now we're going to take it the next step here in basic fighter maneuvers for turn circles. Some quick rules of engagement. We are streaming this video on Twitch. There's an 8-second delay from when I say something from when it comes out over the Twitch stream. So, if you are in both Discord and Twitch, I would suggest muting Twitch so that you can hear my voice in real time and you're not hearing it echo twice. Probably you agree with me that once is enough. However, just understand that when I flip a slide, it'll be about 8 seconds before it comes out over the Twitch for you to see it. I will hopefully correct for that real time as I'm talking. If you have a question, please stop me en route, because these are some heady concepts, and come up, unmute on Discord and ask me the question there so that folks can hear it in real time, and I will explain to the best of my ability. Okay, and we're going to start with a quick review from what we did last time. The 3 pursuit curves that we discussed last time: lead, pure, and lag. Very simply to execute, but these are building blocks going into a much bigger concept as we start talking about basic fighter maneuvers, BFM. So pure pursuit is simply putting the gun cross on the target as he turns, and lead is putting the gun cross out in front, and lag is putting the gun cross behind the guy. These do different things as far as aspect and range. As you're closing, this assumes similar fighter performance and co-airspeed. This is all about just the geometry of how to close with the target or not close with the target, depending on what it is specifically you're trying to do. Lead pursuit will close range, will attempt to solve heading crossing angles, but will create more aspect problems because it'll drive you out towards the front. If you pull enough lead pursuit, you'll actually fly out in front of that guy. We call that affectionately the Syrian lead turn. Fly out in front of him, and then he shoots you. Lag pursuit does the exact opposite. It slows your closure. It solves for aspect and angle off, or heading crossing angle, and aspect and angle off. However, it opens up range. If you hold in lag, you'll end up in a wide tail chase. And pure pursuit actually just ends up in a stagnated fight. So those are the quick and dirties of that. Remember that all of these things, pursuit curves and turn circles that we're about to talk more, is all about getting yourself to that what we call weapon employment zone, that sweet spot at high 6 behind the target, where you're stabilized, where if he goes left, you go left, if he goes right, you go right. It's very easy to play follow the leader with a guy who's trying to evade you from that position, and it's extremely easy to gun their brains out because you're right in the heart of the WES for the guns. You have a nice bit of top planform to shoot at, so you're not shooting at the thin edge of the other spacecraft. And you've used these pursuit curves to solve angles, solve range, solve closure, and achieve that WES. Now, the reason why we're going over this is because what we found out at CitizenCon, which was actually a bit fortuitous that we had this discussion prior, is that they are changing the flight mechanic, and they're expecting it to be out in 3.4. Not 3.3, 3.4. So what we're playing with in the PTU right now is still the previous flight mechanics, even with some of the tweaks and improvements that they've done. It's not the new flight mechanic. The new flight mechanic, which I'm not going to go into in detail now, you can always go take a look at our links on Discord and go find the link to the CitizenCon panel that discussed all of it, which was a phenomenal panel. One of the effects of the new flight model is most likely the circle strafe that is so predominant right now is going to go away. You're not going to be able to just play helicopters on acid as easily, Mech Warrior, as easily as it used to be. Quote unquote dog fights in the Star Citizen Ascent aren't going to denigrate down into just circle strafe as much as it used to. That's my expectation. It'll actually start driving this thing into the larger, more classical dogfighting that you would expect in aerial combat. So we're building on these concepts now. So on to turn circles. Round and round and round we go. All right, when we say a turn circle, when your fighter craft is turning at a constant G and speed, that will define a circle in space. You will turn with a constant turn rate. You will have a constant radius, such as shown in this first example of this dashed circle here. However, the turn circles shrink as speed shrinks. If you're holding a constant G but you're slowing down, then that shrinks the turn circle. The size of the turn circle is both a function of how much G you're pulling, how hard you're turning. In other words, the sharper you turn, the tighter the turn circle. And it's also affected by speed. The faster you go, the larger the turn circle. So the same G load, if you hold the same G load, a larger speed, a bigger speed gets you a bigger turn circle. A slower speed gets you a smaller turn circle. If you hold a constant speed, then just barely pulling on the G makes the fighter craft trace a huge circle in space. And if you pull really hard and do maximum nose rate, then it'll carve a much tighter circle. So both of these things are important in what you're doing to understand these things. So what typically happens as a fighter craft, whether it's in the atmosphere or the way I expect 3-point force flight mechanic will happen, is as you pull, depending on how hard you pull, beyond a certain point, a certain G load that you're going to pull, it's going to cause your craft to start slowing down as you bleed away that kinetic energy. That will, of course, cause the turn circle to tighten, and you'll kind of fly this button hook or J hook sort of path. The reason why that is because as the turn circle shrinks, the center of the turn circle is also sliding over to where the smaller turn circle, because of your reduction in speed. So that's another thing to understand, that bandit out in front of you, as you see him start cutting this corner in 3.4, you won't see this yet. Okay, so all of this is future stuff. So we'll go over this again, but I want to at least get you started now. You will see these guys basically as they start to turn, as the craft slows down, it will start turning into a tighter circle, and it'll fly sort of this J hook or button hook kind of pattern out there. Okay. Now, of course, we're talking about this all up in 3 dimensions. So, a turn circle is within a plane. So but this applies in basically all 3 axes, regardless of what you're going. So, in the purest of 6 degree of freedom maneuvering out in space, this actually is a sphere that you could trace with the fighter craft. If you keep turning in the same plane, then you're curving a circle, but you could actually trace any sort of a line. You could start coming off from this way and then rotate, come down a little bit, come right up on the front. You could turn this into any sort of a 3-dimensional spirogyra. So that's the other part to remember, is that while we're talking about this, we're going to be showing very, very 2D views, but this actually, you can take any of those circles and rotate them anywhere you want in space as you roll and reorient the way in which you're turning, whether you're turning in yaw, turning in pitch, or you basically can reorient those things with a roll. Okay, so this guy out in front of you starts this Break turn because he realized you're back there and you're going to try to shoot him, right? Well, there's one of the reasons I've made a comment earlier in a previous academic session about there hasn't been a dogfight in Star Citizen yet because of a. It's not an adage. It's not a wisdom. It's not a what is it? It's not an idiom. It's a saying, but it's a saying because it's a law. It's truth. There's no dogfighting outside of the turn circle. A dogfight is the use of three-dimensional geometry and energy control to maneuver yourself to a weapon employment zone on the enemy. That all happens at, near, or inside of the enemy's turn circle. So considering right now in all of the previous flight mechanics, you could basically, at any speed, could just rotate around in space like helicopters on acid, which is what drove us into circle strafe. There's basically no turn circle. Your turn circle is not defined. There's no limit to how tight you can get the craft to turn. And that's what why we end up in circle strafe is because the turn circle is effectively zero, non-existent. So you end up basically just rotating around each other, in a strafe, in a sideways strafe, while you're rotating opposite in either yaw or pitch, however you're doing it, and trying to shoot the other guy while you're sliding out from underneath his pipper. That's another game called Mech Warrior, where you just circle around each other, shooting each other from the sides. So there is no dogfighting outside of the turn circle. You've got to get to the turn circle. You got to get to the other guy's turn circle before any of this geometry and energy management and all of these principles start working. Outside of the turn circle, the longer you stay outside that guy's turn circle, he's able to turn and make more angles on you. And if you don't get into that area, if you stay outside his turn circle, he will eventually be able to turn around and point at you, which is bad. Right now, missiles are nerf, but I don't think they're always going to be nerf. I think the end game is that missiles are going to be worthwhile. They may not be the end-all, be-all, but they're definitely not going to be. You're not going to be able to disregard them forever. We can disregard them right now because they're made out of nerf and they're a freaking joke. But I don't expect that's going to be the case. So the very first thing that the attacking fighter does once the defensive fighter starts turning is he's got to get to the turn circle, and we call that the turn circle entry window. And it's a space basically almost where the guy used to be. It's actually slightly earlier than that, but this first maneuver for the attacking fighter, if he's outside the turn circle, he's got to get there. So it's just a straight ahead acceleration maneuver. You just don't turn, just aim right where you think the turn circle window is, which, like I said, is just inside of where that guy was. And it's just a full grunt, full maximum acceleration to get there as fast as possible. Because for every fraction of a second that you are outside of his turn circle, he is building angles on you. He's getting his nose farther away from you and farther off of your nose before you get there. So you got to get there, and you got to get there like yesterday. So then as you hit the turn circle, we're going to talk about what happens if you don't hit the turn circle right, if you go in late or if you go in early. But right now, this is basically drawn as a perfect turn circle. You're basically trying to sort of align your circle with his because you're going to be hitting this because you did this big acceleration maneuver, accelerating this whole time that he's doing a brake turn, decelerating. You now are going to hit this turn circle with a speed advantage. And so if you can hold basically the same circle, a little bit outside, a little bit inside's fine, but in general, you're pretty close to being right on the same circle. You're eventually going to rate around this circle. You're flying the same line he is, but you're doing it at a higher speed. You will eventually end up behind him. This is the basis of what we call lag BFM. Because you'll notice that your nose is in lag the whole time. Remember those pursuit curves that we talked about. Okay. All right, so you heard me mention it earlier about an early or a late turn circle entry and what are the consequences for that. The center line right there is sort of the perfect turn circle entry window. This symbol right here where you see this sort of half long rectangle, that next to a straight line on when you're drawing up dogfights, that is how you indicate an acceleration maneuver. A straight ahead full afterburn, get up there as fast as you can. Yes, I know afterburner is going away, so we'll say full boost. a full thruster boost to get you up to the maximum speed you can get at the turn circle entry. If you end up so early would be, as like you said, you turn early. We call this sort of HUD BFM. So as this guy tracks around on the red line, you here on the blue line, if you just keep kind of pointing at him, you're going to end up in this early turn circle entry, which also, by the way, will eventually set you up for an overshoot. And I'll show you that here in a sec. If you don't hit the turn circle entry correctly and you go late, then what you're going to see is that as this guy curves around the circle, he's going to go past. Now, all of this stuff is assume you can see out, you can look up and see out the top of your canopy, because that's where the fight's going to go, assuming this is a pitch fight. If it's a yaw fight, then it's going to be out to your left or right, depending. In this case, as it's drawn here, it's going to go left. You're going to be turning your head and looking out the side of the airplane when they get off to about 45 off to the left side. If a late entry, they're going to be rating around past, probably farther than you can turn your head, and you end up way out here back behind them, which I'll show you again what the consequences of that can be. Typically, on a good turn circle entry, they're going to be about 45 degrees off your nose, whether that's 45 degrees up if this is a pitch fight, or 45 degrees left or right if you're gonna fight this in yaw. Okay, so here's kind of the three paths. Now, I didn't have time to change this graphic and get the colors right. So here now they have the defender you're chasing is in blue, and the attacking fighter, is in red. I don't know why the old F-16 manual did that, but it's wrong, because I'm the attacking fighter and I'm always blue. Anywho, so starting at point 1, so there's the defensive fighter, there's the attacking fighter. Big acceleration maneuver as the defensive fighter does a brake turn and moves to 2, about the time that the attacking fighter hits the entry window. You'll notice that looking out the top of his canopy, that guy's about 45 degrees off of his nose as he starts his pull. If the attacking fighter is late or lazy on the pull, he's going to shoot way out here, and he's going to be back outside the turn circle again as the defensive fighter continues to turn. What the defensive fighter will do is, if you give him enough room as the attacking fighter, if you give the defensive fighter enough room, he's going to bend this around at the maximum performance. He'll give up all of his speed to do it. He'll turn and point. And now, at best, you've gone from offensive to neutral. At worst, you're going from offensive, and now you're dodging his shots, which would be bad. If you come in and you hit this early, you get buck fever, or you HUD BFM it. You just keep pointing at him. That's going to carve you way inside the turn circle, out here near the center of his turn circle. Because remember, his turn circle center started about here, and then as his speed bled down, it slid to about there. So as you say, you're cutting way across the inside of the turn circle. This angle that's setting up right here will be too tight then your fighter will be able to corner. Okay, so this is setting up what's called a flight path overshoot. You're going to keep pulling as you're at 3 and he's at 3. As he keeps turning, you're going to end up you're going to hit the maximum turn rate of your vehicle, and you're going to go shooting, spitting out this way. And he will have at least neutralized you for a bit. And if you do it grotesquely enough, if you really pull this in tight here and come really close aboard, he might even be able to reverse and turn around on you and shoot and flush you out front and be able to shoot you then. Then you've just gone from offensive to defensive. So the perfect line, of course, is this middle one where you come in, you get right on the same G, and you basically try to align your turn circle to his pretty close. This is, we show this drawn on pieces of paper, measured with a micrometer and drawn with a crayon, but then we go out and we cut it with an axe. So understand that this is all relatives and kind of close enoughs to get it done. So that's why it's shown so grotesquely, is because it has to be pretty grotesque for the late or the early to be uncorrectable. All right, so here's that early consequence we talked about. The attacking fighter comes in too early, gets HUD BFM. At here, he's still almost pointing at this guy. And then the defending fighter just sees it if he's looking over his shoulder and sees that coming, sees the nose still pointing at him. He just pulls, because keeps a nice tight decreasing radius turn going, and eventually that's going to exceed the turn radius capabilities of the attacking fighter, and that guy's going to end up flushing out front. If this is really gross and he gets way out here, this guy might be able to stand it up, turn it around on its, do a little pirouette maneuver, which is called a reversal, and flush the attacking fighter out front. The late consequence is, like I said a minute ago, if you flush way outside their turn circle and give this guy enough range, if you don't keep your turn circle very close to his, you just give him enough range, this guy will be able to just carve this thing around. Oh, by the way, the 2 checks means a big out of plane maneuver. So while we're looking, all of this sort of is being defined as one plane. This is mean the guy rolled either, and because it's a larger followed by a smaller, this means he rolled down away from us, so into your computer monitor screen as you're looking at this, and he went and he curved this down more through what we would call the vertical from our perspective right here, to tighten this turn radius and get turned around and neutralize you. So now you guys are in a high aspect fight, or he's shooting at you, which is bad if you started on offense. We call that losing. Okay, so there is all of these things are this discussion so far has been with a bandit who's using what we call a constant rate defense or a constant turn defense. He's turning, trying to get you out from behind him, and hopefully set up a situation where he can put you out in front of him. There is one other a variation of this that I felt was worth mentioning, and this is called the check and extend bandit. This is a guy who, he first sees you back there. We're back to the blue being the attacking fighter, as it should be. So the bandito looks back there and sees you coming after him. He does the first brake turn good and hard, like you would expect. You come up for the first turn circle entry, and as you start into your turn, as soon as your nose is off of him for a moment and you're no longer immediately threatening him, he lets off his turn. He probably doesn't even roll out if he's smart, because a rollout would telegraph what he's up to. But he may just push and let all the G off, select afterburner, accelerate away from you, trying to escape, and then when you see him starting to run away from you and you don't see the aspect changing, you see rapidly changing aspect as you get back behind him, but he's getting away from you, you go like, oh crap, that guy's a check and extend. So you turn everything you can as fast as you can to try to get your weapons pointed at him so you can threaten him and make him turn again, because otherwise he'll just run away. So when you do that, the big thing is that he has slid his turn circle that distance across space, right? That acceleration moved his turn circle center out over here somewhere. So even though you did a good turn circle entry the first time, he's moved his turn circle out away from you. A check and extend bandit is moving his turn circle away from you. So you have to roll out, do another small acceleration maneuver, and do another turn circle entry on him. If he does another check and extend, you got to do it again. If he does another check and extend, you got to do it again. Every single time the check and extend bandit extends, he's moving his turn circle away from you, trying to see if you're dumb enough to forget that there's no BFM outside the turn circle. So if you don't do that turn circle entry a second time, you're most likely just going to end up doing what we call an early turn circle entry, or just HUD BFM. You're just going to end up going right at him the whole time, and he'll end up being able to set you up for a reversal and probably death. So that is some initial concepts. So I can tell by your stunned silence that this is probably pretty high-speed stuff. It's nothing that we're going to be able to practice right immediately, but when 3.4 comes out, we will be talking this quite a bit. We'll be talking some BFM basics a lot over the next quarter, next 2.5 months. And when 3.4 comes out and we see the new flight model, and if things happen the way I think they're going to happen because of what we heard at the CitizenCon flight model panel discussion, we should at least mentally know what it is we're talking about when we go out and start practicing this for the first time. Okay, remember all of this. Turn circles, pursuit curves is all about fluidly maneuvering to solve the angle, solve the range, solve the closure, and achieve that weapon employment zone. The same closing thoughts from last time. I'm just going to reiterate them of the now versus the future. There are barriers to using this stuff, which is why this is just academics right now, and we're not going to practice it yet because we can't. The barriers to use is that you're looking through the world of Star Citizen through a computer monitor. And until you either are using track IR, you're in a full dome sim, or the head tracking portion of FOIP is useful, you really can't look off axis in your jet in Star Citizen. You can't really sit here and have your head track this guy as he goes ripping around his defensive turn circle and wait until he's about 45 degrees off, and then that's your cue that you've hit his turn circle and start carving in on him. You also can kind of do this if you have the proper HUD and sensor information, which they don't have. It would be great if they did, but they don't. And all the other things I've already said about IFCS and that things are changing. They're coming in 3.4. So that wraps this up. Before I close, are there any questions people want to pop up right now? So I'm looking over in the chat on Twitch. If there are Aurora Republic citizens that don't have link privileges, then that means I probably have something set up wrong for you guys, and I will, when we're done here, I will have to figure that out. So I had some technical difficulties. My laptop is definitely not powerful enough to be able to stream at the bitrate that we want. So I had to very quickly set everything back up over onto the main rig, and I will have to figure that out later. Okay. Okay, yes. Fate hates me. I'll have to figure out afterwards how to make you a mod, brother. All right, so nobody's unmuted and asked any questions, so I will wrap this up, and then we will go play in the verse. So this wraps up this installment of Academics with Foghorn. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions I didn't answer, please feel free to contact me via email, Discord, Spectrum, or the comments section below, and I will answer it to the best of my ability and as quickly as I can. If you're part of the Aurora Republic membership, and even if you're not, and you haven't hit the subscribe button or follow on this channel, then please hit it. We'd always appreciate it. Enable the notifications so you can remain up to date whenever we stream, post new content. And do give us feedback. It really does help us, and we do actually care. Do we have a...
I
hey,
do
Wes?
have a question.
Sure. What's the question?
Sorry, I do. Discord chucked me out for a second there. If you've got two fighter forces coming straight at each other, that's technically not a dogfight, is it?
It's about to become one.
Yeah, but if they get shots off beforehand, it counts as not in the dogfight.
Yeah. The game of chicken that starts off in what we call a high aspect pass. Yeah. Remember, aspect is the angle from the target's tail to where you're at. So if you're charging head on at him and he's charging head on at you, that's high aspect. You're both at 180 degrees aspect to each other. That first high aspect pass is not actually part of the dogfight. It's not really a dogfight until you start turning.
And that's more likely where missiles will come into play.
I've heard some discussion of that. And if that's the way it ends up, that's fine with me. But there are better ways that they could do it, in my opinion. You know, if I was ever to be a technical advisor for CIG, and let go, hey guys, this is how it's really done. This is how it really work. Oh, by the way, your missiles 1,000 years from now are galactically worse than current modern day missiles. You know,
they need to go watch The Expanse, for Christ's sake.
How did technology go backwards in 1,000 years?
Especially season 3 of The Expanse. There is so much in season 3 of The Expanse that is like a snapshot of the visuals from Star Citizen. It's unfreaking canny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so. And technically believable.
Same people.
Just Drake makes all the missiles in the game. That's all.
Missiles made by the lowest bidder, and the lowest bidder is Big Benny's. So.
Oh, a Big Benny's torpedo would be amazing.
The noodle torpedo.
Yeah.
Be awesome.
Splat. Okay, that just gave me an idea.
Yeah, these diagrams that I'm showing you in here for the initial discussion of BFM for the next few academic lessons, you're always going to see it marked up as the fighter starting roughly somewhere behind the defender. BFM is actually sort of considered like a blocking and tackling drill or wind sprints. BFM isn't the actual fight. These are the in practice wind sprints we talk about because it builds on a concept, and these concepts all build on each other until you get to the point that you're actually talking about a full-on dogfight or full-on air combat tactics or aerospace combat tactics. So here at the beginning, understand that please don't call me out of hey guys, every single one of your diagrams always start with one guy behind the other, and the answer is yes. That's deliberate. That is because we are trying to learn a concept. So it starts from okay, here you are, and then as we build understanding and capability amongst our membership here, we will start expanding that out into bigger concepts of like, okay, what happens if all of your intercept geometry that you've worked on gets you to the merge, and now the guy sees you at the last second, he turns and takes all of your turning room away. He just turns and points at you, and so now you guys are beak to beak. How do you handle that there? That all that stuff is coming. This is building block approach, so we're starting small. This is a crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly. So anywho, any other questions?
Something else to think is all of this will instantaneously change in multiple axes. So what's up this moment will be left the next moment.
Yes.
Will be down the next.
Yes, that's
constantly
exactly
rotating reference frames because it's 6 DOF.
Yeah.
So
and
warm up your brain.
Flying in fighters is the same way. It really is full 3-dimensional, but there is a limitation.
Still have the constraint of forward flight because of aerodynamics.
Well, yes and no. In general, yes, but the bigger constraint is the
energy,
ground. At some point you can't.
Gravity.
Yeah, at some point you can't use vertical down anymore, and at that point, your 4 DOF, 4 degrees of freedom, ends up turning into about 3.5 or 3.25 degrees of freedom because you're not really able to you give up the energy game inside the atmosphere because you're inside of a gravity well. Isn't just speed anymore. It's also speed and altitude. And altitude, and I'm getting into a whole nother lesson here, but the short of it is your total energy on the aircraft. Basic physics is potential and kinetic. Potential in aviation is called altitude because you can exchange altitude for airspeed. I can dive the aircraft and gain speed, and vice versa. I can exchange speed for altitude. So that total energy equation eventually runs out as you fight yourself down through turns and all that stuff until you get down near the ground. And now you have no more potential energy, and the only portion of your energy equation is speed. Unfortunately, with drag and the state of motors and all that kind of stuff, that becomes a limited resource too, which is kind of basically why we always say that dogfights always go downhill, because they always go down towards the ground as each pilot tries to maximize the performance of their aircraft by using gravity to help them turn around and maintain as much speed as they can. And eventually it's going to end up with somebody dying, theoretically they're going to end up dying, 5 feet above the ground with, 100 knots left on the airplane. Because, if it was true, if the attacker and the defender are an equal aircraft and they both make no mistakes, then the attacker is going to kill the defender after about 3 minutes, like I said, 5 feet above the ground with 100 knots, and they're both going to almost be out of gas. So it's a game of hopefully don't make mistakes. So now it's a little different game when you get out in space. Okay, you don't have drag.
How do things like Harriers change it up? A Harrier can VIF, which reduces its speed and moves it up.
Yeah,
when you start to its flight line, which means the guy overshoots or undershoots. True.
The ability to thrust vector is a huge advantage, and it changes the game, but it doesn't change the concepts. The F-22, when the I fought the F-22 here right at the end before I sort of retired out of flying fighters, and I fought the F-22, which is thrust vectored, and yes, it was the worst butt kicking I ever got. But the concepts, he still has a turn circle. And that's the same thing. The same comment goes.
He could just make it smaller very fast.
And yes,
over and make it bigger very fast.
He can make it smaller very fast. He can make it bigger very fast. He can reorient the direction in which the turn circle is lying in space. And this is what most fighters are going to be able to do in Star Citizen, which is still going to be very interesting. Will people still be able to circle strafe in the 3.4 flight model? Probably. I don't think it's going to happen very often because you're going to have to slow. In other words, the 3.4 flight model, the throttle is now going to become important. Right now in the 3.3 and earlier flight models, you might as well not even have a throttle.
Aren't they talking about nerfing maneuvering thrusters though, so that you might just be a ballistic turret at some point?
If you decouple.
Right.
Yeah, if you decouple, you will still be able to rotate regardless of where your vector's going. You won't be changing your vector. At least just simple rotation. The 3 rotational axes won't be changing your vector. Right. If you thrust...
Flip around, fly backwards, shoot the guy.
Right.
He's chasing.
Exactly. You're going to be a ballistic, like you said, a ballistic turret.
Yeah, I do that.
When you're decoupled. Yeah, I do that too occasionally. I'll go running away from a guy, decouple, spin around backwards, maybe shoot at him a few times, and then couple it back in and let the thrusters overcome the initial velocity vector. So it would be possible to still end up in a circle strafe with a guy. It's just not going to happen as often because right now, 3.3 and earlier, the way comm stab works is when you command a turn, the comm stab commands your retro thrusters to fire and slow you down to a speed in which your maneuvering thrusters can turn the vector at the same speed as you can turn the nose, which is pretty much exactly opposite to how that should be mech'd. And that's why I say you could just unbolt the throttle out of the cockpit and throw it overboard because you don't need it. When the comm stab does that, throttle just turns into an on-off switch. Give me max throttle because I don't have to worry about moving my left hand on the throttle and slowing down and making a decision on how fast I want to go. The computer just does it for me. I just shove the stick wherever I want, and if I'm going too fast, the computer just slows me down. Which is great if you're an idiot, but don't tell me that that's a dogfight, because it's not. The pilot, first off, as a pilot, I find that offensive that a computer would ever, if I have my throttle up at a setting, I have commanded that, and the ship had better damn well do what I said. If I turn and it slows me down in real life, I would immediately terminate whatever we were doing. I would declare an EP and I'd be taking that jet home, doing a controllability check, and I'd be like having one hand on the eject button because I did not command that to slow down and it did it on its own. Bullshit. That's called out of control. If I did not command it, that's the definition of out of control.
Yep. You aren't commanding the microcontrol stability changes from the flight control system in the F-16, right? I mean,
if the F-16 at any time does something that I did not command, we're done for the day. I'm going to go hand that thing back to the taxpayers and go, it's broke.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just talking about the stability control of the fly-by-wire. I mean, it's doing uncommanded by the pilot adjustments to attitude and flight.
To do what?
To stabilize the
to do what?
The flight vector, right? I mean,
to stabilize the flight vector where?
Well,
where the pilot commanded it.
True. I guess it's a cooperative command then, I guess. I don't know.
Well, their command stability is doing something that it's doing the exact opposite of what I commanded.
I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying I find it to be a strange... I guess it is. You're telling it to do that because you want it to do that while you're telling it to do a thing? Is that the idea?
If I have my throttle set at full throttle, I had better be going that, if full throttle is whatever, if mil power in the Hornet is 200 knots, let's just say that 200 meters per second.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I do with the stick. The stick isn't supposed to control speed.
Right.
The throttle's supposed to control speed.
You don't want your car jumping into third gear when you've set it to second gear or reverse.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is are they trying to make? I wonder if maybe they're trying to go, because I have heard in the conversation about flight control, the IFCS stuff, we're talking about having the like IFCS stabilizing your turn as you're trying to make it fly more like a jet.
Yeah, while you're coupled.
Right. That's by nature going to have to slow you down, right?
No.
At some point, or it's going to be a cheaty turn, because you're not going to have.
If you're doing
as much thrust authority.
If you're doing 200 meters per second, you should turn at a certain rate.
Okay.
If you're doing 400 meters per second, you should turn at half that rate.
Yeah.
Does that
make sense?
Yeah.
That makes. Okay. I know where you're. I thought you were saying something else. Okay. Yeah.
Just one comment about flying people into the ground. During World War II, the Air Force, British Air Force, had women flying the aircraft from the factories to the airfield or from repair to the airfield. One of them got jumped by a German fighter in the middle of England, and in an hour-long dogfight, she flew him into the ground in an unarmed aircraft.
Good on her.
Oh yeah.
She won.
That's baller right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's during Korea, I think James Jabara, I think one of his kills was he chased the MiG-15 down into the ground. Like he chased the guy, and the guy was as the guy was defending himself, he was looking back over his shoulder at the attacker, and flew into a hillside. I know it happened a couple of times in Vietnam. Like it's been documented. There's like gun camera footage of it. Of also like missiles just going stupid too. That was the other thing. Vietnam missiles were the air-to-air missiles that we were using were, man, they sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. In World War II in Holland, there was one pilot took off from an airfield. This was as Holland was falling to the Germans at the beginning of the war, and he had no ammo, and he wound up playing ring and rose around the Rosie around a couple of tailings dumps in the middle of Holland, which is a mining area. And eventually he made the turn so tight that the German fighter on his wing clipped the tailing dump and went down.
Yeah. The PK of the ground, probability of kill. The PK of the ground is not quite 1, but it's almost 1. It's really close. There's a couple of documented times of guys hitting the ground and surviving. There's an F-16 aggressor out at Nellis that we still have the HUD tape of the guy clipping a ridge line and then bringing the jet home. And then there's an A-10 guy out there that drug a wingtip, ripped a wingtip off on the A-10. Airplane went into a uncommanded roll, really low to the ground, basically, and he grabbed the handles and rode the seat out. Just by sheer dumb luck, happened to get it when the seat came out of the jet while the plane was going through upright. He was like, 50-50 chance, because he was like 100 feet or less. I mean, it was like in 2 more seconds this jet's going to be in the ground. So he just got lucky.
Good guy.
And it went, he went straight up and floated down the chute. The F-16 guy skipped off a ridge line and brought the jet back and landed it fine and saved the jet, but he did a bunch of damage to the bottom of the airplane and all that. The airplane kept flying, which is funny because that's where your air intake is. for your engine. The engine intake is down on the bottom of the airplane. So it was like, how the hell did he not take a scoop of dirt or a scoop of
Yeah.
Whatever.
scoop of dirt or a scoop of tree limbs or some shit like that?
Fuselage.
Yeah, exactly.
So do the Martin Bakers not have a like a self-righting feature on them? One of the late model Russian ones does, because I've seen that happen. And have you seen that video?
Yeah.
The MiG-29 guy that punches out, and it gyros it upright, and
Yeah.
that's pretty wild looking.
It's the fourth generation fighters don't have Martin Bakers. They have Aces 2.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but now the F-35 I think is a Martin Baker. I want to say 3. Don't count me on that. Might be a higher model number of that nowadays. But the F-22 is I think an Aces 5. So that's like three generations past the. And I think those do self-righting. The Aces 2 didn't. You know, if you were sideways, that's the way the sucker just shot you out. You know, 500-600 feet in that direction.
Good God.
Yeah, so don't punch out inverted.
We had an Aussie punched out horizontally, very low to the ground, but he got lucky because there was a drop off to the side, and he went out over the drop off, so he had extra height to get the chute up,
Mm-hmm.
and he survived that. But the plane was a real mess.
Yeah, somebody jumping out of the jet causes a lot of angst. One of my longest missions was when General Goldfein got shot down during WW Kosovo in '99.
Mm.
Yeah. My 4-ship had checked out. We headed north out of Serbia, went up and tanked in Hungary, and we had crossed Slovakia and Czech, and we're just getting back into Germany, headed back towards Spangdahlem, and we get called on the horn. Everybody turn around and go back. You know, we've got a CSAR going on. So we're like, oh crap. You know, so we student body reverse, push it up and haul ass back to the tanker tracks in Hungary, get up on the tankers, take full loads of gas and everything, and then turn around and get raging back down into Serbia. And by the time we're getting there, they've already picked him up, because it's been like 2 hours since that call. They've already picked him up. They're outbound. So we're getting there like after the fight's over.
Oh.
So they're like, okay, everything's good. You guys go ahead and go home now. We're like,
Just got
turn around.
here.
Yeah. Turn around again. Drive all the way back. So
you probably got some Serbian aircraft controller going, oh heck.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So yeah, so then we turn around and go all the way back to Spangdahlem and land. And our typical sorties were like, you know, during that was like 6.5, 7 hours in the jet. And so I think we landed and we were at like 11.5 hours. we were less than pleased.
I think I read a book about some other dudes. He was a Viper pilot, but he recounted a story of that in his book. It was maybe half a chapter, but
yeah. So and of course he was Lieutenant Colonel Goldfein. He was the Triple Nickel Squadron Commander. Now he's the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So apparently costing the American taxpayers a $40 million airplane gets you promoted.
How do you like that?
I mean, at least.
And they let him write a book.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it was yeah, that was a really long day. And some of our squadron was actually down at Aviano as well, and plus our sister squadron from across the base, they were also forward deployed down in Aviano, and they were the guys that actually went in and did the suppression mission while I think it was, I can't remember if it was the Triple Nickel or the 510th out of Aviano that went in and did the Iron Hand. They went in and freaking dropped the bombs on the SA-6 site that had shot him.
Oh, nice.
And blew all the pieces up. They got all of it. But we got some great the Block 40 F-16s, which had lantern pods going in to drop the laser guided bombs. They actually had the radar in the field of view of the targeting pod when the guy over in the 2-3 goes by the call sign of Dog. His last name's Kennel. So of course they named him Dog. Yeah, so when Dog Kennel put his AGM-88 harm down on the radar, and so they actually caught it. They were getting ready to drop, so they had their crosshairs on one of the launchers. But in the corner, there's the radar up on the little hilltop banging away, and boom! I mean, right in between, right. I mean, it was no question. I mean, so much of the
Best gun camera picture ever.
boom! This guy's the missile comes raining in out of the like the hand of God, just smacks the dish, blows the dish up. Yeah, it's some really great footage. Like, yeah, count that one as a kill. So, and then
All right, do you want to go ahead and get in verse?
Yeah, man.